Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
I'm Egbert, the owner of this station. Check out my website at egbert.com. That's E-G-G-B-U-R-T, egbert.com. Now it's back to Brad and John. Check out their website at bjshow.co. The BJ Show? Come on, guys. Anyway, here's B and J.
Well, people talk about toxic masculinity and easy fix. Be a gentleman, be a mensch. That's it. It's done. Be a gentleman, be a mensch. A gentleman is never rude by accident.
Jimmy Carr, the tremendous comedian who a lot of people hate, a lot of people love. I find him fascinating myself. He's doing, I don't know if you'd call this the new kind of comedy, because Rickles did that. Remember where he would like sort of attack people in the audience? You know what I mean?
Insult comedy,
right? Yeah. Insult comedy. Well, Jimmy Carr sort of insults people, but Matt Rife, we've talked about Matt Rife before. Matt Rife is this very young comedian who is super good at working the audience. And, I'm thinking to myself, God, because most comedy is routines. They do a routine where, you go to the Funny Bone. If you go to the Funny Bone, if you see like a 7 o'clock show and you go to the 9 o'clock show, it's pretty much going to be the same stuff. Whereas Matt Rife is interesting because every show is different as opposed to Jimmy Carr. Okay. We have a sad situation from yesterday, and just this morning I heard it's turned out to be a very tragic situation. A St. Louis police officer was killed yesterday morning in traffic. Do you know about this story, John?
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, he was on 70. And explain what happened. I don't remember.
There was apparently a stalled car, and I believe it was like an off-duty firefighter from one of the North County munis, or somebody who was their car stalled in a traffic lane, and this police officer, like almost a 20-year veteran, I think like an 18-year veteran in the force, showed up and was putting out some traffic cones to try to direct traffic away from this stall, and was hit by a motorist. It turns out now that the motorist was A, intoxicated, and B, an illegal immigrant who'd already been deported once. And you hear these stories and you go like, okay, this is, and I know people are going to go, well, it could have been a guy who's lived here all his life and got drunk. But the problem is it wasn't. It was something that, think about it for a minute, that instead of having this, I don't know, I want to sound like Mr. Republican here when I say, well, it's better to have this border where essentially they're going like, hey, come on in. And then you find out there's all these crazy things where they're chartering flights and bringing complete plane loads of people under some program or stuff like that. The thing that I find fascinating about this is, and maybe we'll take this to a higher level, the situation with the way our government works, okay? We have three branches of government. We have the judicial, we have the executive, and we have the legislative, okay? To my knowledge, the legislative, which is the House of Representatives, and the Senate, is supposed to make the laws. But yet, what happens is the bureaucracies make the laws. And it's to the point where it's like, okay, how does that work? I mean, if you want to be a scholar of our Constitution and you go back and you say, okay, why is let's use one, EPA allowed to do this and this and this and this and this? Why aren't all those regulations formulated by Congress, by the House and Senate, but instead they empower these organizations? And by the way, here's a little trivia question for you. When they talk about the Republicans, when they always say, oh, the Republicans hate the EPA, Democrats, they know how much good the EPA does. That's why the Democrats love the EPA. Do you know who started the EPA? Do you know this?
A gentleman named Richard Milhous Nixon in 1974.
A Republican started the EPA. It wasn't a Democrat. It was a Republican. So you get what I'm saying? It's to the point where...
I get exactly what you're saying. Now, I think a constitutional attorney would probably say that the legislature sets the federal legislature sets the parameters by which those agencies operate, and then the agencies have leeway to create and promulgate rules as they see fit, right? But what you're saying, Brad, is that it's up to whether you're a state legislature handling state departments or whether you're the federal Congress handling federal departments, that you should have the ability to rein in these agencies for crazy stuff like the waters of the U.S. rule or something.
Well, and you spoke about one specifically, which has impacted me for years, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But, if you've ever watched any of these videos on YouTube, and there's a ton of them, if you want to see some really interesting interactions between our, elected officials, namely two of them, which I see all the time because there's tons of them out, with Josh Hawley, our own senator from the state of Missouri, and John Kennedy, the senator from Louisiana. When he gets these department heads up there who know nothing about what they're doing. I mean, John Kennedy's favorite one is, I think, and Hawley's had him, the guy who runs the BATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, okay? This guy is clueless. I mean, even to the point where, I hate to say this, but, you look at some people and you go, man, that guy or that lady, boy, she looks intelligent. And you look at other people, you go, boy, that person, it's raining outside. Do they have enough sense to come inside and not get their hair wet? You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, so you're saying the ATF guy falls in the latter category.
He looks like a cartoon character, and they ask him all these questions. And once again, it's to the point where I think John Kennedy had this guy. I don't know how this happened, but John Kennedy had this guy who was nominated to become the head of the Denver airport. How he got into a congressional hearing, I don't know. And I think it was John Kennedy, goes through the whole thing. Are you a pilot? No, I'm not a pilot. Have you ever run an airport before? No. Every single question. Do you know? Are you familiar with the FAA regulations? No, not really. It's like this guy runs the airport in Denver, which is one of the largest airports in the country. It's like, how did this happen? And your example of this is when we talked about this. Matter of fact, this is on one of the best of shows that was actually running again this morning before we went on the air. The city school thing, where you have a woman who is, and I'm not saying anything bad because she's a woman. She's a black woman. She could be a Chinese woman or a Chinese transvestite or whatever. I don't know what it could be, anything. But you bring somebody in and who essentially says, one of the things they say is, I'm going to hire all my friends from where I used to be because there's no talent here in St. Louis. Right off the bat, that should be signal flare number one going off with a huge explosion, like problem. Get what I'm saying, John?
Exactly. Yeah, boy, does that. But also, Brad, not only does it say it's a problem, but to me that hints that a little corruption might be on the way, don't you think?
Well,
like, I want to bring in my own people to make a little money off this.
What happened to that story? That story's like dropped off the face of the earth.
Hey, it hasn't. And in fact, Brad, while we've been on the air, the Post-Dispatch has replaced their top headline with a headline that says, "Decision looms for suspended St. Louis public schools superintendent." Now, because I pay rapt attention to what you say, Brad, I have not yet read the story, but I'm guessing that a deadline is coming up, and it's kind of fish or cut bait, I'm assuming, for public schools of what they want to do with this chick.
Is she on suspension with pay? Is she getting paid?
I would assume so, Brad, because why would you possibly put somebody on suspension without pay after a corruption allegation?
I don't, and there's crazy stuff going on even in St. Charles County. Okay, I personally know, not like he's a good friend of mine, but if I walk into a room and he sees me and I see him, Dr. Bernie Dubre, who used to be the superintendent for the Fort Zumwalt School District, I think for like 30 years. I know the guy. He's always at chamber meetings. He's always very approachable. I know people are going to say, well, I don't like Bernie. Look, I've met the guy. He seems like a great guy to me. Now, there will be people that maybe work in the Fort Zumwalt School District go like, oh my God, the guy's terrible. He's retired. Okay, the new guy, after like a year, he resigned. I'm going like, okay, how do you go with the school district that's had a superintendent for 30 years and then the next guy resigns after a year? Don't you scratch your head on things like that?
Yeah, but I think he might have been angling for the Wentzville Danielle Tormala payout and just wanted a couple million, Brad.
Well,
like, why not play hardball? Like, do it for a year, say that you're a veteran, and then make up some story about how you're being bullied or the parents are asking too many questions, and then be a hero and move on.
I got into it.
You would be a terrible bureaucrat, Brad.
Well,
You know, like your sense of hard work and duty have no place in public bureaucracy.
John, okay, I'm going to tell you a stupid little story, okay? Brad, the business owner, okay? I can look around in this studio and I can say to you, okay, that cost me $500. I've had that for 6 years. That cost me $600. This cost me $2,000. I'm looking at all the equipment, okay? I know what it cost me. I know how I had to sell X amount of advertising and do X amount of remote broadcasts or whatever the heck I do with the radio station to afford that equipment, okay? That's the way it works. When you are working for the government, it's not your money. It's taxpayers' money. So you don't, in my opinion, you don't really care because it's not your money. You know, if all the people, like let's say all the politicians had to take a stake, like, you know, put in profit sharing or something like that. I mean, like, well, look at the federal government. Okay, look at the federal government. If all the politicians were like on a profit sharing plan, and essentially they said, okay, your pay is going to result from the fact that how well you govern the government, and once we get out of the $35 trillion deficit, or the debt, then you'll get a paycheck. Well, now some of them, they don't care because they're rich. You know, they're like, you got like the Pritzkers of the world. You know, it's really funny. I saw a meme on this the other day where, do you remember the Democratic National Convention? Do you know?
Oh, yeah.
Remember the two speakers who were back to back? Remember who was right in front of Pritzker?
I don't know.
It was Bernie Sanders. And
wow.
Bernie Sanders is calling out all the rich people. And Pritzker comes on and essentially says, I am a billionaire. You know, I'm going like,
yeah.
I mean, how interesting was that? You get what I'm saying? I mean,
I get exactly what you're saying. Now, you know, the progressive folks, Brad, would say that that's really unfair because you can't hold a salary, like you can't hold an elected official's salary over their head, because what if you were destitute and you went into public service just to improve the community? You couldn't withhold a paycheck from somebody and say you're not going to get paid until things get better, because that would discriminate against people who are lower income, Brad.
Well, I'll give you a perfect example. And this is something that I've said before, and people roll their eyes when I say that. I think there should be a constitutional amendment that's put into effect for all levels of elected government, that if you're running for an office, unless you are running for re-election to the same office, if you're running for another office, you have to resign your current office. Okay? So in other words, if
you feel very strongly about that. Yeah, Brad.
Oh my God, I do. And here's a perfect example. There was a comment made the other day about how come, you know, Vice President Harris isn't around for this duty and that duty, and the response was, well, she's on the campaign trail. You and me are paying her to campaign. Let's be honest.
Absolutely. Of course we are.
She's getting a government paycheck, and she's getting a government paycheck not to govern, but to campaign. And the thing that bothers me about it is, you look at President Biden is getting a government paycheck to sit on the beach in Rehoboth, or wherever the hell he's at in Delaware, and sit there and absorb sun, and maybe get too much sun and have the Secret Service rub suntan lotion on him, something like that. I see, once again, if it's a private company, if you see some dude who's, you know, like the guy who, I don't know who it is, the guy who runs Worldwide Technologies, a relatively young guy.
David Stewart.
Okay,
yeah.
You know who it is. Okay, if you see him driving down a highway in a Bentley, to me it's like, you know what? That's fine, because of the fact that he earned that. He risked his own money. He took the risk of running a business. Lord, I know about the risks of running a business. He took the risks of running a business, and he's got the fruits of his labor. Okay, but yet when I see like a politician who's being chauffeured around in limousines and stuff like that, I'm going like, I don't know about that. You know what I mean? I mean, it's to the point where
you've been consistent about it though, Brad, because you would say the same thing about Donald Trump when Donald Trump was campaigning. I'm guessing you were saying the same thing in 2020 when Donald Trump was campaigning. And you do like to see Donald Trump play golf, though. So that's the difference between you and I. I think he should be taking campaigning more seriously. And you think he should be at Pinehurst working on his short game.
No, you get tired of things I say. I said it before. Trump made fun when he was running in 2016. He made fun of Obama because he says Obama was on the golf course all the time. And what does Trump do? He's on the golf course. Second assassination attempt, he's on the golf course. Now, I get it that to some people, maybe that's my problem. I'm wound too tight. I don't really have any release for me to relax or stuff like that because I just work all the time. It's just what I do, okay? And Trump goes and plays golf. I'm saying this, and you talked about 2020. Trump was running for re-election. So in other words, that's my exception. If you're running for re-election to an office, you can stay in that office. But like Vice President Harris, she's running for president. Resign as vice president. Bring somebody else in who can do the job full time. Who would that be? The Speaker of the House? Oh my God, it couldn't be the Speaker of the House because he's a Republican. They would report. The president would put somebody in there. Okay, that's the deal. And once again, it's like the deal, like Kehoe, he's running for governor, resign as lieutenant governor. Bill Eigel, and by the way, I keep wanting to ask you this, and I just hit my memory. Mary Elizabeth Coleman, is she out in January as a senator?
No,
she have 2 more years?
She was elected to that state Senate seat in 2022.
So she's got 2 more years.
Correct, yeah,
okay.
At least 2 more years.
Okay, but once again, even her, I'd say Mary Elizabeth Coleman, she was running for Secretary of State. She was originally running for U.S. Congress. Then she switched over to Secretary of State. Resign your Senate seat and give us someone in there who will give us full-time attention to that Senate seat. Is that too much to ask?
It is, yeah. It's wildly unrealistic and it's unfair because you should be able to campaign on your own time. And if you were able to show, Brad, so off the top of your head, I know the answer to this is no, but humor me here. Can you point to some instances where Mary Elizabeth Coleman wasn't there for her constituents from the time session ended in May to the time of the August election? Can you point to balls that she dropped?
Okay, John. Let me turn the question, and people get mad at me when I do this. I'm going to answer the question with the question, okay? Let's go back to the days when you were working at Monsanto, and you spent 4 hours a day working from Monsanto and 4 hours a day trying to get another job, okay? And your boss found out about that. What would happen to you?
It wouldn't exist in corporate America, which is not the same as government. So I don't think you heard me when I asked the question, which was, do you think Mary Elizabeth Coleman or Bill Eigel dropped any balls in their district? Was there a grant coming through Weldon Spring that Bill Eigel missed? And I'll point out, too, that both of these folks have staff, right? They're not a one-man band. So, Brad, I get your point, which is it's a nice feel-good populist line of everybody should quit their job. Yeah, great idea. So let's give all Democrats in the state of Missouri a better opportunity to win by saying, oh, no, you're a Republican elected official. You got to quit what you're doing. You have to quit serving your constituents. Intelligent people can do both. And there doesn't have to be a bright line between being a good public servant and campaigning. You and I just disagree on this, Brad.
There's only
and it is a good, I'll give you, though, it's a good, feel-good, meaningless, populist line, though. It sounds really good.
There's only 24 hours in the day, and you only have so many hours. And if you have a job, and you work let's say you're just a normal 9-to-5 kind of dude or dudette, and you work your 8 hours and you're done, and maybe you have a side hustle, you do that. Okay, that's afterwards. But to answer your question, Mary Elizabeth Coleman and Bill Eigel, were they deficient in their duties of being senators? I would say yes, because of the fact that they were out campaigning. Instead of being in front of a group at the Rotary Club or stuff like that, they could be in Capitol Hill or wherever it is, Jefferson City. They could be there championing new laws. But no, they're out talking to the boys and girls. Well, the boys, the Rotary Club is, the Rotary Club is integrated. It's which is the club? It's the Lions when it's all dudes, isn't it?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. See, that's my opinion on it. But you know what? Opinions are like anal orifice. Everybody has one.
Belly buttons, Brad. Not everything has to be anally focused. Everybody's got one.
That's what John said. Okay.
Easy, Brad.
Okay.
Hey, this is a PG show.
Okay, we have to take one more break and then we're done.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest. John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?